Marinette Hits Her Head, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction, written and narrated by Christina. Chapter 10. Reflections and Old Friends. Ladybug landed softly on her balcony, rose still in hand as she crept through the skylight and slipped onto the mattress below. She leaned back against the fluffy cushions and gave herself a moment to breathe after such an emotionally turbulent day. She wished she could stay cozied up against the safety and softness of her little bed, but knew it wouldn't be a good idea given her current head condition, and had never even dared venture up on it when she wasn't transformed. Ladybug sighed and rolled over, only to find herself inches away from a pair of dazzling emerald eyes. She flinched, glancing away, only to turn back with a begrudging curiosity as she examined the faded photograph posted against her wall. It was a picture of a boy around her age, his face resting against his arm and inclined toward the camera in a way that was inviting and thoughtful, while still holding a sense of nobility and confidence. Ladybug slid down her ladder and gaped as glimpses of his face seemed to appear everywhere she looked. Ladybug turned about in wonder and peculiar fascination, finding the whole room filled with pictures of the boy scattered all throughout her desk and belongings, randomly tucked inside notebooks and plastered to nearly every wall space she could find. She had noticed it before, of course, but just assumed she was really into fashion and perhaps had a thing for this particular model. Now, she glanced at the rose in her hands and felt her heart sink and lift at the same time. For weeks, she and Cat Noir had been growing even closer together, falling into a comfortable rhythm that was both playful and earnest, and after seeing the poster, it had seemed only natural to assume she would have easily fallen for him. A chill ran down her spine as she remembered how selflessly he had jumped in front of her to absorb a vaporizing blast just last week, and she had a feeling it wasn't the first time he had done so. He had said it was because she was needed to bring everything back, but the look in his eyes told her he would have done it regardless of their powers. He was so kind and brave, with a generous heart that was always willing to give more, and tonight he had proven it once again. She had been so anxious yet hopeful to repair their perceived relationship, and assure him that her love for him would grow to be just as strong as before, only to find out she'd never loved him in the first place, and was merely leading him on with an overly grand gesture and carelessly given false hope. Not that he blamed her for it, Ladybug thought with a sigh, recalling how graciously he had turned down her affections and explained the way things really were. Her eyes wandered back to the rose between her fingers as she remembered the soft look in his eyes and how tenderly gentle he was. He loved her, the thought causing a warm blush to fill her cheeks. But she didn't love him. How could she not? Who was this other boy anyway? From the demented amount of photos placed around the room, she had her suspicions, but found it hard to believe she could be that shallow. Really? Some rich, know-it-all model boy was more attractive to her than the kind-hearted, heroic partner she fought beside on a daily basis? The boy who loved her enough to respect her wishes even when she didn't remember making them in the first place? Ladybug turned to glare at the photo nearest to her, obviously clipped from some magazine article, with a boy wearing an expensive collared shirt and an almost smug look on his gallingly handsome face. Oh no. There was no way she was falling for that haughty, stuck-up jerk over her already perfect partner. Not if she had anything to say about it. Ladybug sniffed airily and felt a determined peace settle across her heart as she went to carefully place a rose beneath several books in order for it to dry into something she could save. But as she took them off to the side, some other petals fell out, and she curiously opened the book to the page they were from. A crumpled yet elegant rose stood out in a dark red against the pages, its long, slender stem trailing to the bottom where a small slip of paper was tucked next to it. The paper was almost blank except for a date and 2 letters written in a swirling hand-drawn script. C.N. Ladybug smiled. Perhaps her old self wasn't quite as indifferent as she thought. Ladybug dropped through a skylight and carefully closed it behind her before hopping off the loft bed and allowing herself a quick stretch as she sighed contentedly. Phew, that was a close one. Good thing Cat Noir recognized it as a Cindy monster, or we... Ladybug froze as she found herself staring into a pair of dark glasses and the golden gray eyes of a girl in an orange plaid shirt, whose reddish-brown hair hung in wavy curls around a face that flickered with an inquisitive smile. Gah! Ladybug exclaimed, her arms springing out uncontrollably as she stumbled backwards and nearly tripped headfirst onto the floor. Whoa, chillax, girl. Everything's okay. Ladybug stiffened at the strange hands holding her steady and quickly backed away again. This isn't what it looks like, she said hurriedly, gesturing wildly as she scrambled to come up with an explanation. I was just coming to, check on Marinette, 'cause she's a citizen who got hurt and all, and I just, must have jumped in the wrong room and found you instead, so lucky you. Or lucky me. Actually, unlucky me, because this must seem totally awkward and embarrassing, though I am pretty lucky most of the time, or rather, only some of the time. Actually, I'm not lucky at all, and it's to you, Marinette. Ladybug paused her desperate ramble and turned in exasperation. What? The girl raised an eyebrow pointedly, and Ladybug smacked herself in the forehead before tilting her shoulders up with timid hopefulness. I mean, who? Ladybug's frame sank defeatedly as the girl let out a merry laugh, shaking her head in disbelief, though her eyes still twinkled kindly. Don't worry, girl. You already told me your secret a few months ago. Plus, I'm your best friend. You can trust me. She held out her hand with a confident smile. The name's Alya, a.k.a. Rena Rouge, she added with a sly wink. Rena Rouge? Ladybug repeated, taking the girl's hand and giving it a tentative shake. Alya squeezed her back and let her hand fall as she slid open the orange pouch at her waist. Ladybug gasped as a whiz of bright orange with tips of white burst out and a fox-like Kwame hovered in the air between them. It's been a while, the Kwame exclaimed with an air of arrogant cockiness that dared the world to throw something against him, but his eyes twinkled teasingly and his tone was tinged with playful affection. Marinette, this is Trix, the Kwame of Illusion, which you entrusted to me in order to have someone else available in times of emergencies. Ladybug blinked and gave a friendly nod to the small creature. Hello, Trix. She turned back to Alya, her eyes wide with confusion and surprise. Wait, so you're the missing fox holder? And I told you my identity? Alya tipped her chin smugly. Mm-hmm. But how? Why? I mean, if we're best friends, I guess that makes sense, but where have you been? Why visit now? I've been trying to talk to you, but every time I come over, you're always sound asleep, and someone, she leaned closer in playful scolding, hasn't been answering their messages? Ladybug glanced guiltily at the drawer where she had stuffed her phone a few weeks before. It had been beeping and buzzing almost every few hours, but it felt weird receiving texts from people she couldn't recognize, and it was hard to come up with responses, not to mention the screen worsened her headache, so Tiki had willingly volunteered to hide it in a drawer for her. Now she wondered if the phone even had a charge. Yeah, about that. Alya waved a hand dismissively. I get it, girl, we're all strangers to you, but not anymore. She threw a friendly arm around Ladybug's shoulders and gave her an affectionate squeeze. You're not alone in this, Marinette. That's why you told me your secret in the first place. Two can always carry something better than one, and I'll be here for you whenever you need me. Ladybug stiffened and felt an unknown weight lift from her heart as she allowed herself to relax into the girl's embrace. Alya was definitely a good friend if she'd been entrusted with a Miraculous, not to mention her identity, and the girl treated her with such familiarity it was easy to respond in the same way. So, Alya exclaimed, breaking away with an eagerness that was quickly catching. Now that I finally have your awake attention, I need dates, girl! And FYI, she added, adjusting her glasses importantly, I'm also a rising journalist, owner of the world-famous Ladybug, dedicated to Paris's heroes, and your #1 fan. Ladybug giggled as the two sat down on her chase, and Alya pulled a small notebook from her pocket. Details about what? It can't be anything that relates to my civilian identity. Alya rolled her eyes. Of course not, obviously. And this is mostly just for background info, but I mean, you were hit by a bus, girl! I didn't expect to see you in action for months, and yet the second a supervillain attacks, Ladybug appears out of nowhere and takes him down lickety-split. Do you have super healing or something, and just keep up appearances as your normal self? Ladybug sighed. Well, yes and no. My suit has been able to combat the effects of the accident, but the second I take it off, my injuries come back in full force, which is why I haven't transformed back yet. And for the record, I was hit in a bus, not by a bus, she added with a knowing smirk. Not that anyone in the public knows that though, right? She asked anxiously, a sudden fear piercing her mind. Nope, no one but me as far as I know, Alya assured her confidently. I interviewed Cat Noir back when it started, and he seemed a little concerned you weren't meeting up with him for patrols. But apparently you told him you were really busy, and since no supervillains attacked, there was no need for anyone to be suspicious. Ladybug looked up in surprise. No Akumas attacked while I was in the hospital? That's weird. Since I found out I was Ladybug, Shadowmoth has been akumatizing people almost every day. Alya touched her chin thoughtfully. Yeah, I thought that was weird too. Though maybe Shadow Moth was busy planning that big super attack, which you totally crushed him in, by the way, and needed time to get everything in place. I guess that makes sense, Ladybug agreed, staring down as she twisted her toes about aimlessly, but soon stopped as she caught sight of a small yet extravagantly wrapped and decorated object lying in the middle of the floor. Hey, what's that? Alya brightened with a look that was almost mischievous as she hastily sprang up to retrieve the package. That, she repeated pointedly, would be the agonized over and very heartfelt gift from the one and only Adrien Agreste for his very good friend Marinette. Ladybug barely noticed the sarcastic emphasis on the last part as her face lit up with childlike wonder at the word gift, only to fall shortly after at the mention of the giver's name. Adrien Agreste? She stared down at the gold and white paper, sprinkled with pink flowers and wrapped in curly pink bows, and stubbornly hardened her heart towards it, placing it off to the side with a somewhat reluctant sigh. She had already decided she would have nothing to do with that rich model boy, especially if he was the one thing keeping her from accepting cats. She quickly brushed that thought aside as a vibrant blush spread across her cheeks. Hello? I exclaimed, staring at her as if she'd grown 3 heads. You just got a present from Adrien Agreste. What are you waiting for? Don't tell me it's because you're afraid to mess up the pretty paper. Ladybug felt a small smile escape as the thought had crossed her mind, but she quickly neutralized her expression and shrugged carelessly. I guess it wouldn't hurt to open it. Ladybug picked it up and began obligingly tearing off the paper, mentally assuring herself that she was mostly doing it for Alya, who was practically vibrating with curiosity beside her. Both girls gasped as the unfolded paper revealed a silver music box with delicate tendrils of leaves and flowers carved into the side, and was tucked carefully into a velvety gold and pink blanket, covered in beautiful white cherry blossom designs. The multicolored jewels sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting over the little box, and Ladybug couldn't resist sliding her finger along the dainty clasp and flipping it open. The inside was cushioned with soft pink fabric lining tiny compartments arranged for various jewelry, while at its top was a small mouse sitting on a spool of thread that moved in slow, graceful circles as the box let out a gentle yet endearing melody. It was undoubtedly a beautiful and tasteful gift, one that clearly had her interests in mind, and for a moment flickers of kind green eyes and wishful feelings danced about the back of her mind and whispered faint memories through her heart. Wow, Alya breathed, and although she hardly echoed the sentiment, Ladybug was determined not to be swayed by some overly expensive and allegedly thoughtful gifts. Hey look, there's tea packets too. Aren't these those top-of-the-line ones your mom is always talking about? Alya stuffed her hands into the billowing folds of the thick blanket and pulled out several single-wrapped tea packets, neatly tied together with gold string. When Nino said Adrien put a lot of thought into this, I had no idea he was taking it this far. I mean, did you see the cherry blossoms on that extremely soft blanket? That's like your signature emblem, not to mention one of your favorite flowers. And I have no idea how you managed to get that song you like in such a fancy music box. Ladybug purposefully blocked out the flood of information she wasn't ready to acknowledge the strange boy had collected on her, and instead clung to a different bit of information. Nino? Oh, Nino's my boyfriend, who happens to be best friends with Adrien. Pretty perfect, right? Ladybug wrinkled her nose in doubtful confusion as her newfound best friend elbowed her in the ribs. Ladybug tucked the tea packets aside to pass on to her mom, and perhaps to enjoy one herself later. After all, tea was a very normal and completely unromantic thing to receive as a sick person. And besides, hadn't Alya said that the boy thought of her as nothing more than a friend? Tea was a very normal thing to give to a friend. But stoically bundled up the rest and placed it neatly and carefully out of sight. Alya watched her with a strange look on her face before practically exploding in disbelief. Seriously? You aren't even going to use the blanket and, I don't know, put that box on a pedestal or something? Ladybug lifted her chin airily. Why should I? It's not like he'll ever know if I use it or not. Because it was given to you by Adrien Agreste. So? Alya sighed and massaged a hand across her forehead. Look, girl, I know things must be hard for you and you don't remember stuff, but come on. Even you have to at least know Adrien is famous, and it must flatter you a little bit to know he thinks highly of you and cares enough to send you such fancy presents. Ladybug sent her a skeptical look. If he cares so much, why would he send you to give it to me instead of bringing it himself? His father doesn't let him get out much and makes him stick to a really strict schedule, so Adrien asked me to bring it over when he heard I was stopping by. Alya smirked and dangled the tea bags teasingly. Surely you can't fault him for obeying his father, and I know for a fact Adrien went through all the trouble of getting these gifts for you himself. You gotta admit the boy put a lot of effort into it. Ladybug crossed her arms defensively and gave a careless shrug. I mean, sure, I appreciate the gesture, just as I have with all the other presents strangers have given, but I'm not gonna flip head over heels about it or anything. Strangers? Girl, you've been crazy about Adrien since the day you met him, and a few weeks ago you would have been melting into a puddle of ecstatic goo right now. Alya had sprung to her feet, and Ladybug wondered if she really had been the crazy one as the wild-eyed, passionate girl in front of her gestured emphatically around the room. You're telling me you don't even feel an inkling of something when you look at those pictures? You used to go on and on to me for hours about his gorgeous green eyes. Ladybug turned her head up loftily, arms still folded disapprovingly across her chest. I doubt I'm that shallow. There must have been something more to it, and besides, it's not like he's the only one with handsome green eyes. Ladybug gathered her resolve, sensing her friend was about to protest, when something shifted across her features and Alya stopped short, her mouth slightly open as some new thought must have occurred to her. No. Wait, Alya exclaimed, half under her breath, before leaning forward and adjusting her glasses as if she could peer past the mask and into Marinette's very soul. Ladybug shrunk back nervously as Alya's scrutinous gaze intensified. Don't tell me you've finally fallen for the cat, have you? Ladybug gave a sputtering choke as she shoved away, her mind scrambling in protest. What? No way, of course not. I haven't fallen for anyone, and that's exactly how I intend to keep it. Alya didn't seem to hear her, and soon the room was filled with a high-pitched noise that could only be described as an earth-shattering, gleeful squeal, as Alya cupped her hands to her face and Ladybug quickly shoved a pillow at her. Keep it down, my parents will hear you, Ladybug hissed, causing Alya to dive onto the chase and obligingly bury her face in the pillow, as she erupted in a mix of muffled laughter and delighted squeals before finally pulling it away as she wiped random tears from her eyes. I knew it! I knew Lady Noir would be a thing! This is hilarious! I can't believe it! Ladybug pouted in annoyance and embarrassment as she stubbornly took a seat beside her ecstatic friend. Apparently it's not, as you of all people should know. What do you mean? You clearly have feelings for him, and have all along, if you ask me. Not to mention... Alya's eyes widened as her gaze wandered to the photo-dusted walls and back to the blue-eyed girl in front of her. Oh... Cat Noir's in love with Ladybug, and Ladybug's in love with Cat Noir, but the real Marinette is in love with Adrien, apparently. You are the real Marinette, Alya said insistently, attempting to lay a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but Ladybug stood up and began pacing the room in frustration. Yeah, but am I? I don't know anything. Everything is so confusing, and all I know about life is from what my parents tell me and my time outside as Ladybug. How can I be the same person when it feels like everything has changed? Everyone seems to know me, but I don't even know myself. Love is just too complicated for me to worry about right now, Ladybug finished with a sigh, folding her arms about herself as she lowered her head dejectedly. Hey, Alya rose to her feet and watched her carefully for a moment before grabbing a nearby sketchbook and holding it out between them. If you want to know more about who you used to be, why don't you ask your BFF? If there is anyone who can judge whether you're the same person or not, it's definitely me. Without waiting for an answer, Alya helped her to a seat on the chase and began quickly flipping through the pages before leaning over to show them to her. Look here, it's a collection of sketches you made for your mom's Christmas present a few months ago. Which one did you decide to make? Ladybug stared doubtfully at the pages, but was soon drawn in by the intricate purse designs and artful wisps of pencil strokes that danced across the pages. She thought back over what she knew of her mom and glanced over the different design patterns. Well, she likes to be prepared for things, so definitely one with a bunch of pockets. And she likes flowers, so... Ladybug tapped the one towards the middle of the page, and Alya grinned smugly. You should ask your mom to show it to you sometime. The beadwork is especially impressive. How about your dad's? Alya flipped through the book and held up another page, filled with a mixture of socks, aprons, and t-shirts. Ladybug nibbled her lip thoughtfully, then giggled as her eyes fell across a t-shirt with the words, "When life pins you down, just roll with it," surrounded by a circle of pastries and rolling pins. Definitely that one. Alya nodded in approval before skipping to another page. Okay, what about these? Ladybug quizzically examined the spread of square blocks covered in guitar shapes and music notes, mixed with some guy's face in artistic but sketchy blobs. What are they for? Oh, nothing, just the cover art for a Jagged Stone album, Alya exclaimed excitedly as Ladybug's eyes widened in shock and delight. I designed an album cover for Jagged Stone? She thought back to the music playlist her parents had set up for her to listen to while they were in the bakery, and Jagged Stone was undoubtedly one of her favorite artists. Yeah, but it's no big deal. You used to hate his music. Ladybug gasped in offense. What? No way! His music is so authentic and invigorating. Alya let out a light laugh. I'm teasing, girl. Of course you love his music. Now, which album design would you pick? Ladybug's hand hovered over the drawings. Most had a modern, streamlined look to them, but one seemed to radiate energy and had a more stylistic feel to it. This one definitely seems more Jagged style. Right again. Ladybug turned to her friend with a sly smile. How do I know you're not just making all this up? Because it's true, girl. And you know what else is true? Alya closed the book and stared up at her earnestly. The Marinette I know is always thinking on her feet, looking out for others and coming up with creative ways to make the world a brighter place. And that kind of stuff doesn't change. You may not remember all the little details, but what the mind forgets, the heart remembers, and it'll all come back to you eventually. Ladybug had begun to take a deep breath as she accepted her friend's reassurance, but froze as that last part sounded all too familiar, and she remembered a vengeful voice calling it out to her during the eventful night of the ice cream escapade. Ugh, please tell me you don't go to that weird ice cream guy for advice. Alya raised an eyebrow. Is that where I heard the mind forgets line? I knew it was too good for me to be making up. She chuckled with a shrug. I mostly go just for the ice cream, but you know they say even a broken clock can be right 2 times a day. Ladybug narrowed her eyes playfully. Wow, you are just full of poetic wisdom, aren't you? Alya wiggled her eyebrows knowingly, but stopped as Ladybug's expression faltered and her shoulders sank wearily. My heart is the one thing that doesn't seem to remember anything, and keeps rushing into things before my mind can catch up. Alya tilted her head with concern. Are you talking about Cat Noir? Because if so, why not give Cat Noir a chance? You've already admitted you could fall, and, if I might add, have fallen for him, so what's keeping you apart? Ladybug gave a small sigh and turned away. It's not that simple. Even if I did accept his... She paused as her cheeks warmed furiously. Affections? That doesn't mean the real Ladybug, or me when I get my memories back, would, and it would be cruel to raise his hopes only to crush them all over again. Alya's eyes widened in understanding, and she furrowed her brow thoughtfully. Well, maybe talking to Adrien again would give you some clarity. I could ask. No way! Ladybug announced passionately, waving her arms in emphatic denial before pulling herself up with returned stiffness. I don't want to have anything to do with that rich model boy, no matter how nice his gifts or his eyes are, and I'm definitely not falling for him again. If anything, I'm way too busy as a superhero to be worrying about boys anyway. Alya was torn between wanting to tear her hair out and cheer with elation. Marinette had lost her memory, and now she, Alya, the hardcore Lady Noir shipper, was the one fighting for Marinette's borderline obsessive fantasies against her personal OTP. As a thorough journalist, she had known the idea of Lady Noir was strictly of the public's making, even before she found out Marinette was Ladybug, and thus ended all hopes of Ladybug secretly reciprocating Cat Noir's feelings. And yet there was the maniacal part of her that took gleeful delight in all the subtle fondness and admiring glances she caught Ladybug making towards Cat Noir on camera, which Marinette would firmly deny or explain away whenever Alya confronted her on it. All of Paris could see the two heroes had a unique bond and endearing chemistry between them, and it had always surprised her how both Ladybug and later Marinette could be so immune to it. That being said, she still wholeheartedly supported her friend's aspiring pursuit of Adrien, and had been loyally supportive of her wishes even when it came to wiping all traces of Lady Noir evidence from surfacing in the media. And yet, apparently, without any existing knowledge of Adrien, it had taken Marinette only a few weeks to fall in love with her already smitten partner, and now Alya had to watch, or rather listen, as the poor love-struck girl began backpedaling into denial of any and all feelings related to either boy, and would doubtless be confusing herself even more. When Alya had prepared herself to meet up with her injured, memory-deprived friend, she had expected things to be complicated, but she had no idea it would be this bad. Alya's lips twitched into a dry smile as she began to register the ongoing rant Ladybug had been continuing in the background while she had been processing this unlikely turn of events. In fact, Ladybug stated, apparently closing a long string of arguments in familiar, frenzied Marinette fashion, with arms fluctuating between extremely stiff and waving emphatically all over the place. I don't think I even had any feelings for Cat Noir at all, and it was just my brain imagining what I could have felt, thanks to the deceptions of that convoluted billboard. Alya raised an eyebrow, only understanding half of what had been said, when her eyes landed on something green sticking out from a pile of books that had definitely not been there the last time she visited. "Oh, really? What's this?" she asked, darting over to it and pulling the cover back expectantly. "A rose?" she announced smugly, lifting the books with satisfaction, though still careful not to disturb the treasured flower underneath. "Hey, that's private!" Ladybug exclaimed, belatedly rushing to stand in front of it, and held her hand out for the top stack of books. Alya gave them back submissively, but couldn't help the teasing smile that grew across her face. "You do know that red roses symbolize—" "I know what they symbolize," Ladybug cut in edgily, then quickly smoothed her voice back into its feigned aloof state. "And they can also mean deep admiration for someone, or just be a nice color that goes with my Ladybug costume." She hovered protectively over it for a second, then gently replaced the book and stepped back in the direction of the chase with a sigh. "This is just a lot to take in at once, Alya, and I think it would be best if I don't worry too much about things I don't understand at the moment." Alya's gaze softened as a small spotted figure took a seat on the low bed, and she caringly put her arms around her. "Of course, Marinette. Take all the time you need, and know that whatever happens, I'll be here for you whenever you need me. Just check your phone once in a while, will ya?" she added, pleased to hear Ladybug giggle in response and feel her arms tighten around her. "I will, and thanks. I'm really lucky to have you as my friend." Alya gave a cheerful wave to the Dupin Changs as she pulled open the bakery door, only to stop short as she found herself staring into the familiar green eyes of a certain much-discussed classmate. "Adrien, what are you doing here?" His normally steady gaze was turtled wide, and his hand was still half frozen and stretched out to where the door handle used to be, before he seemed to realize what he was doing and quickly tucked it behind his back. Alya's smile widened mischievously as she recognized the telltale signs of nervousness, and took smug satisfaction in knowing who he had really been coming to see. "Well, fencing practice ended early today, so I thought I'd stop by and see how Marinette liked her present. Is she awake?" Alya's smile dropped as she remembered the vehement disdain the girl upstairs had expressed, while insistently repeating she would have nothing to do with the rich model boy, the one whose innocently hopeful expression would be instantly crushed if she allowed him to face the unforgiving storm cloud brooding a few floors up. Actually, now's not really a good time. Marinette isn't feeling too well and needs some time to herself, which is why I'm heading out too." Alya almost regretted her words at the sight of his deeply crestfallen face, but knew she was sparing both her friends a lot of trouble in the long run. "She really liked your present, though," she added, causing him to perk back up with unrestrained delight. "She did?" "Yeah, even liked the wrapping so much I had to convince her to tear it open, otherwise she would have saved it exactly as it was." She cringed inwardly as she realized there was likely a second reason Marinette had been reluctant to open the model boy's gift, but she relaxed as Adrien chuckled happily. "Really? That does seem like a Marinette thing to do." He hesitated, then asked, "Did she seem like she was back to her old self, or are things still really hard for her? I haven't seen her awake since before the accident, and—" His voice trailed off and he shrugged timidly. "I just hope she's okay." Alya felt all her excitement over the Lady Noir development evaporate slightly as she remembered just how much Adrien seemed to care for his very good friend Marinette, no matter how much they both denied it. Alya patted his shoulder reassuringly. "She's still pretty confused about a few things, but I'm sure she'll be back to her old self in no time. She just needs some rest, that's all." Adrien smiled, then gave a small start as he quickly stepped out of the doorframe. "Whoops, sorry. Didn't mean to keep you from wherever you're going." Alya followed him out and quickly closed the door behind her, seeing he was still contemplating going inside. "Actually, I was going to head over to Nino's house. Want to come?" Adrien glanced back at the closed door, shoulders slightly tense before he sighed and turned back to her with his usual smile. "I'd love to. I have an hour before I have to be home, and I was hoping to stop by there anyway." Alya breathed an inward sigh of relief and absently made a mental note to scream into a pillow the second she had the chance. Chapter 11. Ghost of You. Adrien closed the door to his bedroom and set down his book bag, but something fell off, and instead of sitting at his desk or pulling out a video game, he merely plopped on his bed and stared up at the ceiling. What was this feeling gnawing away at him from the inside out? His father had been too busy to eat with him, but that was nothing new. Ladybug had messaged him last night and things had been fine, so that wasn't it. And school was... He shifted to a half-sitting position as the sharp ache grew stronger. School was doing this to him? If he had been any other kid, that would have made perfect sense, except that Adrien loved school. Most of the material was nothing compared to what he had to do under Natalie's rigorous studies. The social aspect, perhaps? Adrien knew he wasn't exactly adept when it came to handling school culture, and sometimes he seemed to miss social cues that everyone else picked up on. But for the most part, everyone got along well, and whenever he was having a hard day, it was always comforting to be greeted by Nina or Alya or Marinette. But Marinette wasn't there. Hadn't been since her accident. Adrien froze as a piercing chill ran through his body, and he shuddered at the unwelcome image that sprung to mind as he pictured Marinette's sweet form crumpled and battered from the impact of the bus, bruises and blood trailing across her arms and face. "Whoa, easy, kid, are you alright?" Adrien glanced up at Plag's concerned remark and realized his breathing was coming in near gasps and his chest was heaving unsteadily. Adrien forced himself to calm down, inhaling deeply before letting it out in a slow breath. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks, buddy." He breathed again and closed his eyes to chase that thought from his mind. Marinette was fine. He'd seen her resting peacefully himself. A little too peacefully. Hours of waiting near a different bedside and gently holding a still hand in his clouded his thoughts, and a small sting grew in his eyes. No, Marinette was nothing like his mother. She was already back home, and surely she must have improved since the first time he went to see her. Her parents updated the class on her condition fairly regularly, and it sounded as if much of her former strength and spunk had begun to return. If only he could find out for himself. It had been a week since he tried to visit Marinette, and Alya had persuaded him not to. He knew it was unfair and kind of weird to hold a grudge against her for that, since Alya had only been looking out for her friend and was trying to help him avoid an awkward situation. But it was the last time he'd had an opening in his demanding schedule, and he couldn't help feeling disappointed that he hadn't been able to see Marinette. Then again, why would she even want to see him? The thought made his heart stop cold, and a pain cut through to his stomach. Improving as she was, she still had no memory of life before the accident, which meant she had no memory of him. Adrien clenched his fist in frustration. Two of his closest friends, and arguably the most important people in the world to him, had just lost their memories, and he had been completely erased from their minds. Things were okay with Ladybug, because they still had to save Paris together, reunited by their duties as superheroes, and Ladybug seemed to almost like him more. He brushed away the hope that flooded at that thought, and clung to the friendship that was so treasured between them. Forgetting her memories meant she also forgot the old tension that had grown between them, and she was free from her past guilt and stress. With Ladybug, at least he'd been able to quickly reform their partnership, but with Marinette, he was still a complete stranger. What if he never got that back? He rose and began to pace anxiously, a growing despair filling his heart, while his hands ran restlessly through his hair, only to slide instinctively to his pocket, and he relaxed as his fingers brushed the cool smoothness of the wooden beads resting there. The sick feeling in his stomach resurfaced, growing stronger as a new thought came to him. She didn't even remember giving this to him, or how they had danced at Chloe's birthday party, or escaped to the movies together, or anything. She didn't remember him. It was as if in one fatal swipe he'd been completely erased from her life. This had to change. Plag, claws out.